This is Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. On the show, you'll hear from innovators in the food space. We'll have disruptive conversations with people from around the globe who are taking the lead on topics like food sustainability, ending world hunger, food security, and so much more. I'm your host, Paul Newnham. In this episode, I'm joined by Sophie Healy-Thow, an Irish food systems and nutrition advocate who has become one of the most recognisable youth leaders in global food policy. From founding the global youth movement Act4Food Act4Change to shaping conversations through the UN Food Systems Summit and the Scaling Up Nutrition movement, Sophie has been a leading voice calling for more inclusive, equitable and sustainable food systems. In this conversation, Sophie explores what meaningful youth engagement looks like. We discuss why cities may be the next frontier for food system transformation, what we can do to better include young people in our plans for the future, and what must change if we're serious about building food systems that work better for people and planet. Let's get into it. Well, Sophie, it's so great to have you on this show. You've been a leading voice in food systems advocacy since you were a teenager. What first sparked your passion?
I don't know if there was a spark, but a slow build-up to my passion. I loved DIY, everything DIY. I loved Lego. I loved do-it-yourself science, doing my own experiments at home. I did not enjoy the classroom one bit. So everything I could do myself, I would. And I ended up doing the Irish Young Scientist competition with two friends. And I did it 3 years until I finally won. That was the aim. I want to be on that. I want to do a project that's so cool that other people love it and that can change something or at least sparks people's interest in what I'm doing. And at this time, I was living with my granny, my sister and my mom in a very rural part of Southwest Ireland. And if anybody's been to Southwest Ireland, you'll know that it's full of farms and green fields and cows and a very strong smell of slurry. So you can't get away from it. So I did a project that involved crops and increasing the germination rate of crops and then also making them longer and heavier. And we did really well for a project where we built shaker tables out of train tracks and a train and Lego and polystyrene fish boxes, and then just made the trains go back and forth as our shaker tables. So it was very DIY. And that sparked a little bit of interest in the science side of things and talking about things. But I think what really built up my interest was being in my granny's farm and seeing where food actually came from. She had a beautiful apple tree. And I had no idea where apples actually came from until she would make me go out and pick them and bring them in to make apple pie. And then she also had tomatoes, and I would call them also Nana's apples because to me they looked very similar, and I would just eat a tomato like an apple. And as somebody who would always just have food on the table, even knowing the difference between these two fruits was pretty new to me. And I think it was my granny that really built up that passion for food.
I love that visual. I picked some apples today, and every time you pick an apple off a tree, it's very different experience to picking it up from a supermarket or it just has a very different experience, and it connects you to that apple. So for some of the listeners who may not know yet what Act4Food Act4Change is, tell us a little bit about it. What is it?
Act4Food is, at its core, a really cool group of young people trying to make change in their communities and globally in terms of food. So we were founded back in 2021 when a group of young people were standing at the back of a really big, important room and we had no chairs. We weren't given any seats in the room at all. And we were looking at each other and we were thinking, right now, there's a global crisis going on in terms of the future of food. And not one person that will be in charge of the future in 30, 40 years' time has been given the respect to receive a seat. And they were talking about the future of food without the future. We left that room. We sat in a very damp corridor, and we decided amongst ourselves that we needed to create something where young people weren't just asking decision makers for change on panels and on podiums, but we were actually the doers, the implementers of that change. So we came up with Act4Food, Act4Change, as it was then called. And it started off as 10 young people back in 2021, 2022, chit-chatting over Zoom. We thought we're 10 people, but we can't speak for all young people, right? So we did a consultation and we got our beautiful actions for change out of that. That's co-created by 100,000 young people under the age of 30. That's our North Star of what we have committed to doing. And these are a huge range of things, such as every child in school should access a healthy, affordable, nutritious school meal, to banning single-use plastic, to ensuring that there's jobs for young farmers into the future, agripreneurs. And that's Act4Food. We currently exist in 30 countries and we've been alive for the last 5 years. So we're still growing. We are just entering, I think, school age, so we still have a lot to learn, but it's a really cool movement to be part of. I'm very, very proud of it.
You've been involved in a champion of youth leadership in food systems. Why is it so important? You kind of alluded to this, but why is it so important young people are not just included, but are actually also shaping decisions?
We currently have, and we have for a long time, the largest generation of young people to ever exist on planet Earth. They're more educated than ever, whether that's in informal school systems or formal school systems, whether they're entrepreneurs or agripreneurs. They have money in their pockets. If they're over the age of 18, they might have a vote, a very powerful vote. And also, we are the most connected generations. Gen Z, I think. I think I'm on the cusp. We're connected. We all have phones, whether you're in a small rural town in Ireland or a big city in Kenya. We all have phones. And that's a lot of power to have. But we need the structures in place in which our voices are not just listened to, but actually brought into the rooms and we're spoken with and not at.
So you've had a lot of experience inside some of these global processes. Where do you see youth engagement working well?
I think they have really hit the nail on the head in Nigeria. I think the leadership in terms of recognizing youth power in Nigeria has been absolutely fantastic. Young people in Nigeria are, I think, that silver bullet that we want to see in every country. So passionate, so structured, so connected. And then they have the decision makers who see that power in them and have actually opened doors for young people to sit at the policy making table and have their voices heard, not just in workshops, but actually where those long tables exist. So I think Nigeria have done it really well. So I would love a blueprint of how that's been done so that we could share it with other countries who maybe aren't there just yet.
Often, my experience is that young activists also often want speed, while sometimes institutions move slowly. So, how do you navigate that tension? Is there any stories of where that's become an issue?
The beauty of being young, it's not just that you're young, but it's that you don't see any barriers or borders to anything you want to achieve. Um, and you asked me this question now, and I think I've already built up those barriers and borders because I think the longer you are in the sector, the more gaps you see, and it's really easy to build up those walls and think, oh, I don't know if that will actually work. What I've seen from young people in Act4Food is that there is no limit to the impact that they can have. And yes, it needs to be done quickly in their eyes, 100%. And it is so frustrating as somebody who has no barriers or limits or borders to not see that change and not understand why. I remember we were at an event and one of our young people, we were listening to a decision maker speak, and they're like, and change takes time. And I not understand the clock is ticking, but we have time. And I remember the person beside me, she's like visibly shaking. She was really upset that this decision maker wasn't making progress as fast as progress should be made. And she stood up and she said, look, we don't have time. There's no such thing as time. We have to act now. We have to act fast. And that acting fast is so much more achievable at a grassroots level, because at a grassroots level, it's community based. You're not dealing with policy and bureaucracy and the downward stream of funding. There definitely is quite a bit of tension. And because of that tension, I'm seeing a lot of our young people in Act4Food actually move away from the global and international space and not want to be part of it because of the frustration that exists.
So, I mean, you've been involved in lots of global advocacy roles, and you're now at a city level role or position in the Belfast City Council. What has that shift taught you? Like, that's a big shift.
Yes, I actually, from what I just said, the shift from global to local has made me understand better the impact that local projects and campaigns have on communities. It is astounding how much cities can achieve, whether they are part of local authorities or not. There's such a passion and a connection between people. Even in a city like Belfast, Belfast is a post-conflict city. It's a very new, I would say, conflict in terms of European standards. We have the largest standing peace wall that runs through a public park. The gates of the peace wall close at about 9:30, 10 at night. So it's still extremely segregated. But what we see is community gardens, market gardens really bridge these communities and bring people together, because that's where they see connection to their city being in something where people can forage under blackberry brambles. Kids come with like purple mouths and fingers because of what they found. It's really incredible. Walkers can walk through market gardens and they normally would never enter these communities, and they sit and have a cup of tea and talk about the greenhouse or the toilet that's compostable. And it's direct impact on peace building and relationships, but also food security for the communities that are around the community gardens. It's really astounding. That's been the biggest impact for me personally, to see this firsthand, the impact food can have as a bridge between communities that would never speak to each other usually.
You mentioned a little bit of some of the challenges in Belfast in its history with inequality, resilience, community organising. How does that context shape the work that you're actually doing now?
Shapes it hugely. I currently hold in my back pocket a beautiful food strategy. Belfast City has not had a food strategy before. It's called the Belfast Way, and it will be launched in the next few months. It's been co-created by the Belfast Food Partnership, which is made up of 24 organisations across Belfast, and it was made also through workshop style formats of different communities across Belfast. And this is to shape the future of Belfast's food resilience and food systems transformation. We have 6 action plans, 6 working groups, and the 6 working groups are community growing and the right to grow, food access and justice, circular food economy, transforming procurement, nature-friendly farming, and good food governance. And I haven't been here that long, and I have not lived through everything that people have lived through here. But I do believe that what people have gone through has directly impacted how they want to see the city into the future and how they want communities to come together.
At the moment, there's a lot of, we're in a period where there's a lot of crisis, from climate change to rising food costs to inequality to some of the more localized issues that you're talking about now. Where do you see reasons for optimism right now?
I see reasons for optimism in the faces of all the people I work with, whether it's in Act4Food, as those young people have received funds for the first time and they're trusted with funds. Oh, mind blowing. And they're small grants, but they can do a lot with a small amount of money. That's my optimism in terms of youth, but also in terms of the communities that I work with here. I was at an International Women's Day event, and what the communities aren't afraid to do is show emotion. Food is emotive. It's deeply historical and rooted in the ground in which we walk. It is not just food on our plate. It has passed through conflicts and generations and intergenerational trauma. It is about land rights and the right to food and the right to grow. When I hear these communities who are working for that and have been for the last 10 to 15 years, like tears in their eyes speaking about this, that's where optimism lies, in people who do not lose the emotive part of food. And if we lose that ever, I think we'll be in a lot of deep trouble. We can get through a lot as communities and countries if we put communities and the people on the ground at the heart of everything that's done.
For listeners who care about food systems but are often overwhelmed by the scale of the challenge, is there something practical that you could say to people that they could do to genuinely make a difference?
I say, bring up maps on your phone, type in green grocers, cooperatively owned green grocers in my locality. I bet you there's at least one nearby, at least one within walking distance or public transport distance. And that's where you should be buying your food. And they're not, I think it's also a myth that it is more expensive, because these cooperatively owned greengrocers are cooperatively owned. They're there for the local community, and you have direct access to healthy food, but also 9 times out of 10, I've got a bag of salad from my local greengrocer in my fridge, and it's outlasted the bag of salad that I bought from my local supermarket. So it does last longer. It's so much more tasty as well. I think that's one small, and it's not small actually. It's big impactful thing. And that's the way our communities, I think should be moving away from that capitalist consumer model of eating and buying towards community sharing and caring for your neighbor.
And for young people listening who want to create change but feel locked out of decision-making spaces, what's a piece of advice you would give them?
Join Act4Food. No, I'm joking.
Perfect.
No, I'm not joking. Please do. Um, I started by writing letters to my local decision makers, and then I realized that they weren't listening, so I went higher and higher up the scale until somebody would. You have, as a young person, a really powerful tool in your back pocket, and that's your phone, and that's social media. And in a day and age in which we are often felt overwhelmed by social media, and you can get sucked into the doom scrolling and the kind of black hole that social media can be, it can also be a really powerful tool for good. And if you look at it and you look at where your decision makers might be, and you have a really important message that you want them to take notice of, maybe get a few friends together and start doing a few social media posts. Or maybe there's a local march or a protest, and it might not seem like food is part of the conversation. But for example, on International Women's Day, we came with the food sign. Food is a gender right as well. And that's what you can do. Show up, have your voice heard, be loud, like make a little bit of ruckus. You don't have all those barriers in place. I mean, be respectful, but your voice means a lot. And all those small things you do, writing a letter, posting on social media, showing up to the parades and protests with the food signs or whatever you're interested in, just being there and being seen is really important.
Is there anything you would say we could do better to bring young people into conversations? You've spoken to a lot of young people, you're young yourself, but is there things that, groups working on food systems could be doing better to bring young people in?
I think, especially in the current climate, when funding and resources are declining rapidly for organizations and also for implementers at a higher level, it is so easy to cut young people out. It does take time and effort to work with young people, and it might seem like a really good cost-cutting exercise. But if you commit to nurturing a generation of young people to be future leaders of change, you're committing to the future of food systems transformation. And I would love to see young people as pillars in every organizational strategy, especially in organizations that don't yet see the importance of youth. And when we have a tendency to be reactive to funding, when instead we should be proactive. If you're looking at a funding model in which it doesn't necessarily have minimum criteria, have young people involved, that shouldn't be a barrier to having young people involved. Young people are not just youth, they're knowledge holders and impact makers in their own right beyond their age. So I think organizations can do a lot more in their strategy to committing to young people. They can do a lot more in terms of their budgets in committing to young people in all their formats. And at the decision-making table, we need more decision makers sharing power with not just young people, to be honest, with a lot of different communities. And I think one of the biggest problems in the food system sector is the unwillingness to share power. And I think it's a really scary thing for decision makers to do, because you spend 20, 30, 40 years of your life doing really impactful work to get to that decision making table, and you want to hold on for dear life. I understand. But the only way forward is if we see beyond ourselves and ensure that our voices are not the only ones being heard.
I want to take you into a slightly different conversation that builds on this. The current UN Secretary General is coming to the end of his term, and we've seen quite a lot of older people in this position over the years. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the opportunity to have a younger person in the role. But first, from your perspective, do you think the UN is still relevant given the current state of the world?
Yes, I do. For all my I love impact at the community level, we do need overarching structures and mechanisms in place to ensure multilateralism does occur. We have a lot of countries in our current world that have dictators at the forefront of their decision making and don't believe in global cooperation. And that is why we need the United Nations in all its forms to still exist, to ensure that countries come together, although not legally binding, come together to speak and understand each other at a level in which they wouldn't be able to if these multilateral structures did not exist. The UN, I think, is a lot more than the UN. I always thought it was kind of scary and that it was like this big, I don't know, like marble pillar of hope in the world. And for some people, that's what it is. It does incredible emergency crisis work as well. But it also does open its doors more often than people think it does. And it is welcoming in different formats to young people and different communities. And since I have known the UN, it has opened up a lot more to a lot of communities. But I think it's 100% relevant and should always remain relevant. But I sometimes do think that it needs to speak to people a little bit better.
Do you think the UN should consider putting a young person forward for Secretary General?
Good question. You know what? I think the UN should consider a feminist-based approach to leadership. Why does it have to be one person? Wouldn't it be so much more powerful to have co-leadership? How cool would that be if there were a young person and an incredible community leader, or a politician and an Indigenous female farmer? What would that interlinkage be? I don't think it necessarily needs to be a young person, but a new format of leadership. I would love to see a co-leadership, feminist-based model be introduced at the highest level.
Good answer. One thing I like to close conversations with is a bit of a question we can all relate to. What's a food memory that has shaped you? You've told us a little bit about your grandmother and apples and tomatoes, but what's another food memory that's shaped who you are today?
I have two.
Go for it.
My first one, and the first one that comes to mind, is my granny was from a really small island off the southwest coast of Ireland. She had minimum primary school level education, but very educated in other ways of being in life that we aren't today. And she taught me how to pick seaweed and dry seaweed and how to eat it. Her favorite food is corrigan moss. And if done correctly, it's this kind of jelly format, nearly like it's a very similar consistency to a rice pudding, but it's so locally available. And she would teach me how to do that. And she would also bring me onto the rocks, because it's an island. And she would teach me how to pick periwinkles, which are these really small black snails, like sea snails, and then how to prepare them and how to make them tasty and how not to be scared of a little being in a shell. I just loved those summers. because I was with my granny who I really looked up to, but also we were doing something in which you had an end result, something fun and tasty you could eat. And then on the other side, I have really fond memories of standing in the trolley in the supermarket with my sister when we were really little, and my dad would pick up billy roll from the deli. I know people know billy roll. It's in the shape of it's a ham, and it's shaped as a teddy bear. And
Okay.
yeah, and we would eat it in the trolley, and by the time we got to the till, it was all gone. We would do that every weekend with him, and that was really fun. So now every time I see it in the deli, text my sister, or have that fond memory of that time.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been a great chat.
You've been listening to Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. Future Fork is produced by Disruptive Consulting Solutions and supports the SDG2 Advocacy Hub. For more info, head to the website futureforkpodcast.com. This show was produced with strategy and production support from Wavelength Creative. So you don't miss an episode of Future Fork, make sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm Paul Newnham, and I'll see you in the next episode.